Okay, who's Zoom user? As I mentioned before, everyone has to log in with his or her name.
Doctor,
Yeah?
Khulud wants to join in.
I didn't get any request from her.
خلاص أنا دخلت.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
دكتور
Yeah?
دكتور هو أنا اسمي ظاهر لحضرتك صح؟
Yara Tariq? Yeah.
تمام
Yeah,
شكرا.
Yeah? Speak up, I can't hear you. No, you don't need to do that. Okay, guys, can you remind me about what we said last lecture about the like cultural approach to comparative politics?
Yes,
Anyone
Dr.
can give us a summary? Yeah, Salwa?
Mayar.
Mayar? Yeah, go ahead.
Mayar. We started talking about alienation. We said what it is, and we said it means to
No,
feel.
Mayar, can you just, I'm just training you in organizing your answer, okay? This is the way I explain some stuff for you in order to make it accessible. So can you give me like a coherent summary about last lecture, like in a very organized way, with kind of, yeah, logical like sequence of ideas? Yeah.
Yes, we talked about culture. We defined it, and we say it means the customers or the way of life that people have. We say it can be changed sometimes, and then we talked about ethnic studies of culture. Okay.
Ethnography, yeah.
Yes, ethnic studies of peoples and things which may make it objective and unobjective. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, like nations, we said, for example. And then we talked about Nasserism and the example of and as an example
of what?
Further about changing cultures.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mayar. Any more thoughts? Any more thoughts, guys? So we start out with the definition of culture. So what culture is? What culture means?
It's the way of life and way of thinking, the behavior of people.
But this is like, as I mentioned, this is like kind of very loose and led to kind of theoretical diffusion that would undermine the analytical capacity of the approach, right, Malak? So, like, sorry?
It's a shared system of values and beliefs and ideas.
Yeah.
A certain region, they all have like the same language and history.
Yeah, in a collective sense or intersubjectivity, kind of constructed meaning of social system. So on the one hand, it's kind of a system of meaning, constructed one by emanated from, you know, this kind of intersubjectivity or intersubjective interaction between a group of people in particular society or particular community. And then we can speak of culture as like certain attitudes or orientation and beliefs that would shape people's behavior as well, right? And then we talked about different perspectives or different opinions about whether or not we can consider like culturalism or like cultural approach as one of the powerful theoretical approaches that would offer us like kind of a causal explanation of sociopolitical, social and political phenomena. Can we? There are like different trends and different opinions. Can you guys summarize that? And this is the way you should like write your reaction paper, by the way. So we started out with the definition, okay? And then whether or not the analytical capacity or the whether or not it would help us, you know, to understand or to interpret or explain social and political phenomena. Can we?
One of these opinions was that we can take culture as the last decision because there will be indirect effects, other indirect effects. And
yeah, it just only like we can consider this effect is kind of indirect effect because it just offered like some strategic environment that would offer us information about people's behavior rather than like independent causal effect. Okay. So that's some would say like we shouldn't take it, you know, seriously. Others would say like a kind of indirect effect. And another opinion would say, like a third one would say what? It's a cause and effect. So it might be a product of particular context, but once established, it would exert like independent or semi-independent effect on people's behavior and people's perception. And like I gave example about, construction of the identity of Pan-Arabism or Nasserism across the region, and it doesn't mean it's kind of fixated or we can offer like a static conception of culture. It might change over time, and that's why how like this Pan-Arabism waned and to some extent faded away, with Sadat's emphasis on Egyptianization as an identity. And then we talked about different applications of cultural approach, so we can see like we can investigate economic and political development through the prism of culture. So I gave like 2 examples. Can you remind me about these examples?
Doctor,
Yeah, Mayar?
as I remember, it was Nasserism, this part, or not?
Yeah, but I offered like another explanation about it's not only it's not the only factor that would affect development, but
Yes.
it has like some considerable impact on economic development. And then I talked about Max Weber and the Protestant ethics, okay, and modernization theory.
Yes, and we talked about Marxism.
Yeah.
Yes, Marxism, and it's
No. It's still not like. And then yeah, I gave like about applications of cultural approach, in comparative politics by focusing on the cultural roots of development by offering 2 examples about modernization and Max Weber, a notion about Protestant ethics of capitalism.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, doctor.
And then we will focus on 2 main applications with kind of 2 different purposes and 2 different meaning of culture. So the first one, this meaning of resistance and conformity, and I explained part of James Scott weapons of the weak from anthropologist perspective. So they do believe in culture as a system of meaning, and the main purpose is not to reach this generalization or to figure out this law-like regularities. So the thing is we need to produce some sort of narrative or storytelling from constructing what people actually constructed or what people actually that bear on, or how people understand what happened to them, how they constructed this, and as anthropologists they would reconstruct what people actually reconstructed, or the meaning they assigned to their social structure. Can you remind me briefly about this like first application from anthropologist perspective, the meaning thing? Well, let me go to the. Did you remember? Like briefly, like the main idea here. What James Scott here tried to understand or to investigate?
I think he tried to understand why the peasants didn't revolt.
Why?
Why the peasants, this layer of people, didn't make a revolution against the rich people.
Yeah. He tried to understand like the conformity of peasants in particular village in Malaysia. So he investigated mainly or examined the rice farmers of Sedaka. So and the context of that was like from outsider, it was kind of these people didn't revolt against their exploitative economic structure, and they actually asked for kind of reenactment of this kind of exploitation, or this kind of submissive to reproduce their subordinate status, or submissive position to landowners or landed elites. So what he tried to argue that instead of offering, this kind of like Marxist explanation or structuralist explanation of people's acquiescence or peasants' acquiescence there. So he actually lived in the village for some time in order to select informants to tell him what exactly, what kind of meaning how they actually realized their social structure, and how they assigned,
Doctor,
to this
sorry,
social
some
structure.
of our colleagues want to join.
Who?
Mohammed Ashraf sent in the group that he cannot join.
I didn't get any request. He can try again and I'll admit him, okay?
Okay.
So what he tried to argue, so instead of assuming that there is kind of hegemonic reproduction, or there's kind of manipulation of how people actually, or how these peasants thought about their social system, their social structure or social system, and there is kind of institutional underpinning or foundation of their false consciousness. So we need to know from their words how they understand and recognize this, and what kind of aims and goals they actually seek to achieve, and how they act upon these aims and these goals. So what hegemony means?
Dominance.
Yeah, I explained this in some detail last lecture.
Authoritarian dominant system that has no active ideological support.
It's kind of,
This is what
yeah.
I remember from the lesson.
Yeah, okay. So the thing is, what Marxist theory, or like this kind of trend of thinking, in order for the ruling class to perpetuate or reproduce their hegemonic position, or to sustain their like economic structure or their material benefits, they had to manipulate or to have control over ideological reproduction as well. How did they do that? By controlling media or the ideological apparatuses of the state. This is what, like, like Marxists would say, in order to infiltrate, society, or to instill these kind of false consciousness and manipulate people's objective interest, and how to block, this perception of class conflict, or a conflict of interest between different classes in society. Okay, so the central argument here, so what this like landowners or landed elites would do, it's kind of manipulation, or how people like to make people perceive incorrectly their interest, and how to actually to relegate or to block or to conceal this kind of conflict between interests. So how when landowners would in this paddy sector or growing region, paddy growing region, when I give you as a landowner kind of loans, and I portray this as kind of generosity and kind of help to peasants or small farmers, so they would buy into this, and they recognize this way, and they reproduce according to this hegemonic framework, and they would like act accordingly. So they would reproduce this over and over again in order to maintain the dominant position and the hegemonic position of the ruling elites. So what Scott here, tries to argue against, it's not like he tried to relegate, to refute, this argument about, this false consciousness, because people from the how did you know that there is kind of a false consciousness in this village or amongst, villagers? Because they didn't revolt against landed elites. Okay, So in a way, they naturalize or legitimize this exploitative economic structure. So they internalized, in a way, this is like the culturalism, you need to internalize particular orientation and values and beliefs, and this would shape your behavior or your perception towards something, okay? So according to this, this structure created like this, like hegemonic structure created this sort of false consciousness, and that's why people did conform to the existing social order or the existing power relations, and they didn't like revolt against this. So the departure point of James Scott here, he didn't deny the fact that this is kind of a hegemonic system. There is kind of asymmetrical power relation between landowners and peasants. But the thing, and this would actually preclude like complete transcript of the context. So what anthropologists would say, it's kind of an incomplete task, because it would be very difficult to have unmasked situation from this within this power structure or hegemonic power structure. So practices in a way would be a byproduct of this hegemonic structure, but it doesn't mean that there is kind of naturalization and legitimation of this subordinate or submissive position. So in order to investigate this, in order to offer kind of thickening or to thicken in our the description about social structure and the meaning people would assign, peasants would assign to this social structure and social system, we examine to how they behave and what kind of orientation and attitudes and meaning they had in order to, that would motivate their behavior and to and push them to take particular action. So the first point here is, in order to be totally absorbed into this power structure and to keep reproducing, you know, the same hegemonic relationship, peasants had to internalize the same value system, or to offer like active ideological support to landowners. But in reality, by living there for some time, he actually observed and was informed that this is not the case. Like peasants actually, they didn't take it this way. Like instead of like receiving these loans as kind of help and generosity from the landowners or from political elites, they actually, the meaning they would assign to this is the rights they are entitled to. So they didn't buy into their story or this kind of discourses that they actually served them. So they didn't reproduce this discourse. On the other hand, they have like their own rituals and values and beliefs that actually this kind of religious orientations and traditions and customs that are totally different from the dominant culture or the hegemonic culture, and they keep it in place. They keep their own values, their own beliefs, their own like customs. They put it into practice and to put it into work, and they didn't actually absorb the same like lifestyle and values and orientation of the landed elites. And momentarily they asked for boycotting. They mobilized against landowners in order to achieve some real gains. So starting from this kind of false consciousness, and there is no realization whatsoever of this power structure and this social order, it doesn't hold true. But what's there, it's kind of a struggle from within the existing normative framework. Like any dominant or any hegemonic structure or any hegemonic system would offer subordinate people or subordinate groups with some cultural reservoir or repertoire. So they have like the same ideological tools. They have like this kind of ideas that would criticize. But instead of having this revolutionary consciousness, they have just a reformist consciousness. So they didn't ask for, they didn't have this banner like down with capitalism, but they can ask for limited material benefits. They may ask for land appropriation, even like a small piece of land. They may ask for pay increase. They may ask for like some limited, some other like limited services, to have in their own village. So this is what they're like. They have like small aims and they act accordingly in order to achieve these aims. So any claim about like this kind of misperception of objective interest or conflicting interest, these claims are not that true. By living there and talking to people and transcribing and taking notes and diaries, he discovered that this is not actually the case. So the actually what they used like the same values and traditions that already existed within this economic structure and like materialistic framework in order to press for their claims. After the introduction of what they call like green revolutions and replacing laborers or peasants with machines and technology, this affected their lives negatively. So they asked to go back to the previous economic structure in order to gain loans, in order to gain some material benefits that actually served them better than the current system. It doesn't mean that they internalized their kind of subjugation or subordination, but they had like their own meaning of objective interest, and they have like their own consciousness or like aim or goal towards the existing social structure. They didn't want to turn it upside down. They had like kind of some thoughts about how to reform it in a way or another in order to take some advantages out of this. So what are their people actually transformed the values of generosity and help into kind of rich stigmatization. So they have like with the same ideological weapons. As a landowner, I would give you money in order to depict this as like help or generosity, but you as a peasant, you would actually the meaning you would assign this by I would like depict you or portray you as stingy or hard-hearted rich man. And they started to gossip around and to have like this kind of character, they involve in this character assassination and gossiping about landowners and rich in order to, this is their own way of, or their own meaning of resistance and calculated resistance in order, because they are aware of the existing power structure and they are aware of the potential repression as well. So this is what they actually prudently would ask for and would press in order to achieve. Some of them actually like committed some or they got engaged in like theft and robbery incidents, and they would for others they would depict this as a form of resistance. But as Scott mentioned, it's more like the intention of people, not the consequences of the act. So if they tell you like that they actually did that as a form of resistance, and this is like very uncommon and rare, because people like usually don't admit any kind of wrongdoing. But if they say that I did that because I really feel this is my right, so that's why I committed or I took this action, because I feel that this is my right and these people actually stole this from me, so that's why I returned this back to me. And this is like very very uncommon. So you need to reconstruct what people actually constructed, not the meaning you assign to their action. So what they have like small ambitions. They didn't have like they didn't want to they didn't have this impersonal historical enemies or historical forces like capitalists. So they have like particular enemies, and they have like limited goals, and they act according to what they believe would achieve their objective interest. So there is no kind of false consciousness, and there is no blocking of demystification of the existing social order. So they are fully aware of the existing social order, but they don't need to envision, any kind of a radical or a new social order in order to to claim that they have like, you know, they don't have this false consciousness, and people like the ruling elites or the landowners didn't manipulate their perception or their orientation towards the existing socioeconomic structure. What they have like this realistic assessment about their life. So that's why you may observe this bewildering and confusing, you know, mix of resistance and this kind of what he called like grudging compliance. So they conform to the existing power structure, but they hold grudge, you know, towards these landed elites, and they didn't buy into their discourse or their ideological reproduction. In order to mention, you recognize the exploitative and the compulsion of the economic relations there. So resistance can be defined as collective act. So collectively, these like peasants, you know, had to act collectively in order to achieve like common interest. But they have their own meaning of resistance. In this way, it may be unsystematic. So every now and then they gossip about landowners. Every now and then they talk about or a specific character, or to actually disseminate rumors about like particular person. So unsystematically they do that. It kind of erratic and sporadic, you know, acts, and it might be self-indulgent as well. So it's not, instead of like acting collectively in order to achieve like the interest of peasants as a class or as a community. So I take this action in order to advance my my interest or my livelihood, without any kind of revolutionary consequences, in order to introduce a new social order. And then he mentioned something about, like, you know, peasants in Mexico. Before 1910, it was kind of legitimization of the existing power structure and economic structure. They didn't have this revolutionary and radical thoughts before the revolution actually erupted. So it doesn't mean that these kind of small acts like didn't deny the fact that it might be culminated into a revolutionary crisis. But like as peasants, you know, they have like this common interest or realistic material need of persistence and survival, but not necessarily to have this revolutionary thought. So he stands like Gramsci and other Marxists on their head by saying that it's not only a revolutionary act, but perhaps you may need to investigate or to look into revolutionary beliefs in order to examine or to dig out the meaning people would assign to that, and instead of assuming, you know, this naturalization and legitimation and false consciousness, and because of there is no like revolutionary consequences of their acts. They may hold different beliefs, they may have different norms, they may have different attitudes and perception towards the existing social order, but it doesn't mean that they are like manipulated by the hegemonic or the dominant ruling class. Okay. Any question?
دكتور
خلود.
لا يارا.
Okay.
Is the peasants are application of the culture, or يعني example for more explanation only?
So one definition of culture is what?
Doing ethnography?
No, you need to understand the meaning, okay?
Yes.
Ethnography is a tool, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like living there, it's kind of one particular...
It's just an example, يعني?
Yeah. Yeah. So how I may have like Nasserism, for example. So I need to know the meaning people assign to this pan-Arabism, okay? Practically and realistically, we are in 2020, so I cannot go back, you know, to live there in order to, I didn't live this period, okay? So I didn't know what happened exactly. So we have some historical archives and records in order to invent memoirs or other tools in order to dive into that context and to make it, you know, like understandable and comprehensible, you know, to you as a researcher. Okay, so regardless of the tool, so what you need, what's the main purpose? You need to understand the meaning of people, how people understand what happened to them, okay, in their own words, okay?
Okay, doctor.
So you may have like interviews, you may have like participant observation, if they have like community-based organization, so you may like have some to work with them for some time in order to observe, you know, how they interacted, how actually they define the social structure, you know, they live in, how they interact with powerful elites or local bosses. So you see the point. The point here, you need to understand people's perception and beliefs and behavior. Okay, the norms that would shape their acts and behavior. So this is the knowledge you need. Yeah, you need to produce. So you have like several tools in order to achieve this. This is one example. Okay. If you need to understand, let me give you another example. If you need to understand the customs and the beliefs and the attitudes of Bedouin in Sinai, how would you know that? If you have a research regarding like sense of belonging or like conflict resolution, how actually they resolve their conflicts without actually resorting to the institutional or the state institutions in order to do that. So they have like, you know, particular customs and behavior that enable them to do that. Okay, and you need to understand this, you know, how their norms and values help, like what kind of authority, like, you know, the tribal sheikh, you know, would have in order to resolve, you know, the conflict between different tribes or different groups. How would you do that?
You said in the previous lecture that is not just writing notes about them, it's about living there and noticing
one tool, yeah, doing ethnography.
Doing ethnography.
Yeah, so you have to decide first, this particular community, I cannot use survey data, like a very close community, okay? So I cannot have like, you know, survey and distributed, you know, my my survey in order to ask them to answer my questions, okay? But I may go and live, you know, or ask them to have like, you know, chats, you know, with them for some time in order to understand their beliefs and norms and way of life. Because I have a research, okay? But instead of offering, you know, this kind of like a structural explanation about the submissive position of peasants, as it's the case here, or the submissive position, you know, to the tribal sheikh there. So this is like my answer to the question, okay? But they may have different answer. So as doing like, or using this cultural approach, so you use people words, what the informants, you know, would tell you, how they actually perceive and recognize their social order. And then you use, you know, this construction, you as like political scientist or anthropologist, you reconstruct this, okay, given, you know, the data available in order to answer the question. Okay?
Okay, doctor.
We have like another application, like as I mentioned, like people like political scientists would disagree with anthropologists, you know, on the way they define culture, okay? So Almond and Verba, in order to study what civic culture is, they were motivated by different models of participation and what kind of participation would, or kind of the right mix, you know, of participation that would stabilize political regime. Because some other sort of participation in authoritarian regimes, for example, in Latin America, this kind of popularization led to authoritarian or it was motivated by populist appeals first, and it's not that like civic, or it doesn't entail any kind of democratic practices. So they were actually motivated by the need to understand participation in modern states and different polity structures in Western democracies, like monarchies as the United Kingdom, or presidential as the United States, and even authoritarian regimes as like Mexico. So they have like this survey. They distributed surveys in these countries, in 5 countries, like Mexico, UK, and USA, and Italy, and West Germany, in order to understand, in order to investigate, different types of participations, or different types of participation and different kind of orientations and attitudes towards political system, and the perception of the self in relation to these systems, in order to understand or to have like categorization of different political culture, and to introduce this new concept or new term of civic culture. So in their own words, they didn't accept this kind of impressionist interpretation of culture. So you see the quote, right? We appreciate the fact that anthropologists use the term culture in a variety of ways, and that by bringing it into the conceptual vocabulary of political science, we are in danger of importing its ambiguities as well as its advantages. So they actually, they didn't agree on the way, this kind of anthropologist would say the meaning, and it's still like impressionist and very subjective. So that's why they need to take, political culture, to political science field, but they need to frame it in a scientific way. So what did they do? So they do different thing. So here they define political culture as political orientations or political attitudes towards political system, and the role of self toward this system. So you as an individual, you have psychological orientation towards particular or social objects, and the internalization of these objects relations would formulate your political culture, or your attitude and perception and orientation towards political system. So this orientation is cognitive, affective, and evaluational, meaning you have like knowledge of like, let's focus on Egypt as a political system, to have like this cognitive orientation, meaning you may have like knowledge of like everything about how this political system functions, okay? The history of the historical evolution of political systems in Egypt, the history, and how different political regimes actually function, and they have different political orientation and different, perhaps, like foreign policy. So you have like some knowledge about and some facts about the existing political system, and the history of your country in a way or another. And then affective, like you have like particular, you formulate or you form some sort of emotions and feelings towards this political system. You may take pride in it, you may dislike it, you may feel alienated from this political system. So you have like some sort of feeling and emotions towards this system that would orient your behavior and actions. And then evaluation, it's like you have to have like to particular opinion that is a mix between this cognitive elements and affective or emotional element. So given the knowledge you have, and given the emotions and the feelings you form, you may have like a sense of what about your role regarding this political system. Can you feel that you have kind of political competence, exactly how you affect the political system? Yeah, your voice actually matters, or you have kind of political efficacy in a way that you can affect the course of events by motivating or like articulating some demands in order to have like particular flow in these existing structures, and to express your demands political candidates in order to transfer or to transform this into decisions and public policies. So it depends on your orientation, these kind of cognitive, affective, and evaluational orientations, and your internalization of these relationships or your orientations on the relationship between these social objects, this cognitive, affective, and evaluational elements. This would determine your behavior and would shape your act and your perception towards the political system in general, and how it functions in a way or another, and then the role of self in this political system. Okay, can you remind me when we talked about system analysis, the input and the outputs framework, because he used them, they used this here, Almond and Verba, I mean.
There is a demand of people, and they put it into the black box and turned it into. Yes.
Noor? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
People.
So you have.
People have a demand,
go
and
ahead.
this demand. People have a demand, and this demand turned into a black box, which political leaders evaluating this demand and turned it into decisions, and this decision have an output which can be turned into another demand, and
the feedback can be like positive or negative. Yeah, positive in like manifested in support, and negative like a new round of demands, right?
Right.
They actually used the same framework here, yeah, in order to examine the attitude or the orientations, these like three components of orientation or psychological orientations towards the self and the system in general, and the breakdown of the system in terms of the inputs and the outputs, okay? So for them, they need to examine people's orientation or your orientation towards, you know, these kind of like the bottom-up approach, you know, the inflows of demands into structures or institutions and rules, the executive and the legislature and the bureaucrats, how actually interest groups and political parties and even media would place some demands on the structure. And then how like incumbent roles like kings or legislators or bureaucrats would actually take or respond to these demands and transform these demands into authoritative decisions or particular public policies and binding decisions that are like, you know, these decisions are binding and they have their own way of enforcement of these decisions. So as an individual, I need to survey your orientation, psychological orientations in terms of like, you know, cognition and emotions and like opinion and judgment regarding political system in general. This is what they did. And every component's like input and output, and then the role of self. Here is like you may like get this better. Okay. Guys, you see the table?
Yes, yeah, Doctor.
Yeah, okay. So you see here, like the dimensions of political orientations. Here, they have like the three elements of orientation: the cognition, affect, or emotion, and evaluation. And then they need to examine these orientations towards like the system in general and the breakdown, the inputs and outputs and the role of self in this system. So they have like questions. You know, like what survey means, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So like before that table, so how they collected, you know, the information systematically. So they had like random sample of nearly 5,000 persons, like 1,000 in each country. They have like they examined 5 countries, as I mentioned, and then they examined, you know, the frequencies of these political orientations towards system in general, and input objects and output objects, and self as an object as well. And from the answers, okay, so they came up with this classifications of political culture that would be like parochial, that people like. I'm going to explain this in detail shortly, but they have like this kind of traditional and non-differentiated, you know, political role, and primordial or tribal affiliation. So they didn't have any sort of orientation, like knowledge or emotions or evaluation of their political system. And then subject. So they may have, when here they have like, you know, kind of like an or emotions or evaluation towards the system, and 0, it means that they didn't have like they are indifferent towards that. So subject culture, like people may have like good knowledge of their political system, and what kind of how the system function, what kind of the division of like political roles, or the differentiation of different tasks of their government. And they have like they are not indifferent regarding the output, like the binding decisions. So they are the subject, you know, to these binding and authoritative decisions, but they didn't see that they have some sort of political efficacy. So they don't see that they can actually have any kind of impact on like how the regime functions, or how the political system functions or operates. So that's why like they didn't have any sort of interest in articulating demands and putting, you know, some inputs on the existing public authority or national government. And then participant, they have like, you know, like positive orientation in terms of cognition. So they have like, you know, like mental processing and knowledge about, you know, political system in general, and they are active in putting, you know, their demands on or claims on the national government or public authorities. And they do care about, you know, the outputs as well, and the binding and the policy proposals, and the outcome of public policies. And they see that they calculated their votes, and they see that their vote actually matters. So that's why they have like this participant orientation towards their political system, and towards input and output, and the role of self in this political system. Okay, guys?
Okay, doctor.
Okay. So what parochial culture would say, like, for example, in, like, as I mentioned, Bedouin in Sinai, for example, or perhaps like sub-Saharan Africa back then. So they had like this traditional role of political leader, or like tribal sheikh, for example. So they have like there is no kind of a specialization with regard to political roles. So they don't have like, you know, this institutional or a politically differentiated system like this. This one is responsible for, this institution is responsible for legislating or issuing, you know, streams of laws, and this institution is in charge of implementing these laws, or like implementing, you know, other public policies or policy agendas. Or this would adjudicate, you know, these disputes between different people or different citizens. They don't have this specialized political order. It's very traditional, and they have this primordial loyalties to their like narrow community or tribes. But in a more differentiated political system, they don't have this cognitive element or cognitive orientation towards political system and its input and output and the role of self. They may have like this affective and normative orientation towards this. They may like take pride in this. They may have like they like it or they dislike it, but they don't see that they have any kind of political efficacy to press for their demands, or to actually to pay attention to how the political system functions and operates, and what kind of political outputs this system would like come up with. The subject culture, they have like a specialized government authority, so you can find this in democratic contexts as well, as they mentioned you can find this in Germany and in Italy. But they didn't have any sense, as if you remember the table, so they do care about how system functions, and they do care about the output and the binding decisions and public policies, but they don't have any sense of political efficacy and the role of self in this political system. Participant culture is like they refer it as like the activist role of the of people or of citizens, but as they mentioned that there is no kind of pure form of political culture. So you may, like in this participant culture, you may find this kind of parochial and subject orientation as well. So people may have like this kind of normative and affective orientation towards small community, like in the United States, or even basically in the United States and the United Kingdom. So they may have their they may they abide by the laws, and they abide by these kind of authoritative allocation of values and decisions, and they actually have their own primordial orientation to small communities. They may have like a kind of religious affiliation. They may have like their own kind of clubs or like-minded people. They formed particular social clubs. They may have like normative and emotional orientation toward them, but these kind of parochial and subject orientations, they don't override this participant culture. Okay, by like cultivating this participant culture, it may change this kind of subject and parochial orientation, but they keep in place these kind of active and informed active role of the citizen in order to affect the political system. And from this kind of classification, they came up with the concept of civic culture. The civic culture is kind of amalgam or the mix between modernity and traditions, and this kind of mix between informed active role of the citizen, but it doesn't deny the fact that they may have, like citizens, they may have different like subject and parochial orientations, but these like orientations don't prevent them from taking active or from being informed and having cognitive orientation toward political system. And in a way, one thing, but I don't want to complicate things here, they didn't pay attention to cultural change or political development. They actually what they care about here, or what's most important for us here, this kind of classification between different cultures, and how like this civic culture is a mixture between these three categories or three types of culture, and like their cognition and their emotions and their like evaluation or their opinionated judgment. They get together, and they actually motivate people or shape people's behavior, participant and active behavior in this political system. And this is applicable to from their sample, and this is applicable to the United States and United Kingdom only. Okay. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we hear you.
Yes, doctor.
Any questions so far?
Yes.
So you
No.
see the difference here? So can you like briefly highlight what kind of difference between what like the two approaches or the two applications? What kind of question, what kind of knowledge Scott like wanted to produce and Almond and Verba wanted to produce, and what kind of tools used in order to produce this knowledge?
In the second application, in the civic culture, he used the tool of the black box, or the tool of understanding how the inputs enter the political system, or how the demands of the citizens and their support enter the
So
political system.
what's the subject matter to start with?
The subject what?
What's the main the main issue under investigation in the two cases, or
you mean what, the researcher try to understand what,
he wants
or
to do what?
He wants to understand the criteria of how the culture, or how the beliefs shape the citizens' behavior.
Almond and Verba, right?
Yes.
They need to understand political culture in defining this as like psychological orientation towards political system and the role of self, in this political system.
How this translated into behavior, into an actual action.
Yeah. So, and then they came up with this classification between like parochial and subject and participant. Okay.
Yes.
What kind of tool they used in order to come up with this classification? And they like introducing, this concept of civic culture.
The tool of this inputs and outputs, I think. Yeah.
System analysis.
This is more or less how they actually build their argument, and they actually innovate this concept of civic culture. But actually how they examined, what kind of tools through which they examine people's orientation and analyzed the data and the information they got in order to categorize political culture into like these three main categories.
They use the system analysis.
Tools.
Survey?
Yeah. Thank you. Who said that?
Oh, Farida,
yeah. So they use survey data in order to systematically examine these orientations, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So back to James Scott. What kind of subject or issue James Scott wanted to investigate?
James, in the meaning of resistance and conformity?
Yeah. Okay, so they need to understand peasants' behavior, like this kind of acquiescence or a passive compliance, or what kind of resistance actually they offered, or how they resisted the existing social order. Okay. How did he do that?
Doctor, I think through ethnography.
Yeah. More elaboration? By doing
when he went.
Yes.
When he information of the people and reconstruct them according to his point of view.
Yeah, building rapport and taking diaries and living there for some time in order to understand the meaning people would assign to their, or how people recognize their social structure. Okay.
Yes.
So you see the tools here. Did you get what I mean by like different methodological tools in order to produce knowledge, right? And this is related to the epistemology thing. What kind of what knowledge we can know about the phenomenon under investigation, and what tools this would affect your tools that you will use or deploy in order to generate this knowledge. Okay. If you believe
but doctor, the difference of the tools don't affect the outcome, صح?
They affect
the outcome.
In what sense?
In different applications, in different applications, the tool affect how they affect the outcome.
No. That was like this will be my next question. Okay.
Doctor, I have a question.
No. Just let me finish this point, okay? Because this is very important. If you remember when we talked about this interpretist in social science, we talked about there is no they don't form a coherent camp. Do you remember that? Like some of them they would say like they need like to produce like narratives from practices, rituals, and these kind of stories. And some of them would say that there is no kind of there is kind of grounded rationality in these practices and rituals, and that's why we need to just interpret these rituals and practices, okay? But with survey data, and this kind of, as we're going to see, I'm not going to complicate this right now, but like after we finish, we will study, after we finish the theories, we will have like a week 7, we will study electoral behavior and like mass behavior as well from different perspectives, okay? So we will see like, you know, how different tools, you know, using, you know, this, or like in order to interpret or to see how culture would cause, or how these kind of psychological orientations would affect people's behavior, electoral behavior, or voting for like particular parties, and lead to realignment or reshaping the electoral arenas. This kind of, you need to examine kind of cause and effect thing, right?
It's okay.
Yeah. So it like, this is back again to your perception about reality, the ontological position, and then the epistemological one. What kind of knowledge from, if you believe that there is no reality, no objective reality, like it's very applicable to this identifiable community. And it actually doesn't, you know, travel across, you know, different other peasants community. So what's applicable to peasants in Malaysia is not applicable to peasants in Paraguay, for example. So you don't believe like you need to offer like interpretation to produce narrative that is like limited to this context. And maybe you can come up with like new concept or a new theoretical tool, but still like it can be refined when it's applied to another concept. But this is different from behavioralist or post-behavioralist stand that they do believe in some sort of causally objective reality. Like if you believe like this kind of orientation and psychological like emotions and these kind of cognitive processes and mobilization would affect political behavior. So you do believe in this cause and effect thing. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So like, so here like, we have like different usage of culture. Okay, so people would use it like differently as like as I mentioned, like a way of life, a way of belief, way of thinking, way of learning, like inherited, you know, legacy of meaning that would like determine or to delimit your the boundaries of your action or your behavior, or it's kind of psychological orientation that would that actually push you to internalize this kind of relationship between different objects. For example, your relation to political system and different component of political system, and the perception of the role of yourself in this political system. How would you affect the political dynamics and political process? But in a way, like if you use like these soft tools, like doing ethnography, some sort of participant observation. So you basically, or like even like, you know, unstructured interviews. So you focus mainly, or the main emphasis here is the answers you get from your informants. It's not like you answering the question. So you use what people say in order to answer your question. And for like for interpretist, the interpreter's purpose is kind of, if you remember rational choice, how, or the positivist stand, how do you know that you go wrong? This is very essential. How to like to come up with a theoretical claim that is like falsifiable in like in nature. It's kind of subject to falsification. Here, by this is like great room for subjectivity and subjective element here for you as a researcher. So for them, instead of like doing like a random thing to produce narrative and to like, this is what Geertz mentioned as well, it's a kind of self-validation. Can you, I mentioned this, you know, in week 2, I think, when we talked about, you know, this self-referential point. with some like interpreters that would make rigorous analytical, or to come up with rigorous analytical framework by adopting these soft tools in order to produce knowledge. So what does that mean? I give a bonus, guys. So like try to guess. If I want to know, like, if Farida like went to Sinai and conducted, this and did, this ethnography with Bedouin community, and then she came up, with this like concept about role of custom in effective use of, or effective custom as effective tool in conflict resolution. Okay, from her ethnography. If I ask her, how do I know that you didn't do it wrong? How can you validate this?
She saw the people behavior and she noted the observation, and she took her observation from the people themselves.
Okay, but this might be subjective. Like if one guy, told her, you know what, I don't believe in this like modern, like the sheikh, I don't believe in modern institution or judicial institution in resolving internal conflicts or community conflict. Okay, and then from that statement, she mentioned something about like the role of customs, and traditions in or like, what, they are alienated or disenchanted, like there's kind of a detachment from existing state apparatuses or state institutions. Okay, from this statement, this is the way she interpreted this. She came up with this alienation and the role of customs.
Doctor, maybe the problem is that this cannot be validified, That's the problem. We cannot.
Yeah. In a positivistic sense, it's not like this hard tool like regression models or mathematical models that can be like falsifiable. Yeah. So that's the meaning of self-validation or self-referential thing. But you make your data available in order to make sure that to the scholarly community, in order to make sure that there is no kind of intuition or too much subjective element here. So as Geertz mentioned, like there is kind of, you can keep this semiotic approach to culture from like what people, how people actually make the wording, and you can analyze this without drifting into this kind of intuition, like no matter how elegant the intuition is. So you don't interpret this kind of I don't believe. If he mentioned I don't believe, it doesn't mean that it's kind of alienation or something. Okay, so like researchers should pay attention to how people understand what happened to them and how actually they informed them. And you can like use like James Scott, for example. It didn't even cross peasants' mind to ask about this agrarian reform, like far-reaching land distribution. As an academic, he did that. He did ask the question, but the idea didn't even cross their minds. They asked for the appropriation of small tracts of lands. They didn't ask for to have like a radical transformation of the property system, for example. So if they didn't say that, they didn't come up with this like notion about reform, like or far-reaching or radical reform. So you cannot use that in your analysis or in your narrative. Okay, so you need to this is like a room of subjectivity, but honesty as well, in order to understand this kind of fluidity of meaning. By nature, it's incomplete and fluid, so it's very difficult to have like a tight grasp of the system of meaning. And this is what like the culturalist would say. And there is no kind of raw social discourse or social practices. Okay, so there is kind of what you observe and what you transcribe or to try to understand. This is the flow of the social practices between different groups, like Badus, the Badu and peasants, for example. So what they lead you into, what they can lead you into understanding is the crux of the matter, not the way you understand this. Okay, there is no kind of raw or stand-alone social discourse or social practice. So you need to understand how they construct their social system or their social structure. And whether or not, like, culturalists would offer us, like, a novel theoretical framework or any new theories. So this is like, here you have like Geert's answers. Like there is no kind of, you cannot speak of like totally original, theoretical framework. Any kind of theoretical contribution is built upon previous work, and this is kind of the cumulative nature of doing scientific research in a way or another. So what they do, it's kind of a refinement or more refinement of existing, theoretical tools or theoretical framework. So here, instead of saying like hegemony and ideological apparatuses of the state, they make, some sort of refinement with regard to the weapons, the ideological weapons from within the existing hegemonic normative framework. So there is kind of more refinement or elaboration or expansion on what's already there or existing in the literature. And what culturalists would do is kind of diving into or penetrating this kind of unconventional or unfamiliar universe of symbolic action. So you need just to decipher and to make, this kind of context intelligible, to research community. So you take yourself, into the heart of these rituals and practices and beliefs and the persons or society, in order to come up with this how different meaning and different symbols and this collective sense of social order and social structure would shape their perception and affect their actions and behavior. And this is intrinsically incomplete, and this is like the issue, or it is what it is with the cultural explanation or interpretation. It's intrinsically incomplete, and they don't seek like large scale interpretation. So if I focus on ISIS or Daesh, so I cannot, I don't know how they do that, as if like, people did ethnography there and talk to them in order to understand, what kind of beliefs, these people have. This is not like generalizable, or they don't seek like this large scale like explanation about Islamic civilization that is like inherently violent, for example. So it's incomplete in another sense. Like if you have like this kind of power dynamics and power relations, it's very difficult to decipher all the situations or all people's interaction. So you need like you need to admit, that this is inherently or intrinsically incomplete, given different other variables. And even like people who talked about this kind of doing survey or regression analysis about modernization, or like but this can be if they did like regression analysis, it can be like can be falsifiable, or you can speak of validity and reliability. But for example, like even if you need to dig out the cultural roots of like particular sense of development, or cultural roots of particular like business community in particular sector, for example. So this is not like a large scale about like how capitalists, in Egypt or in Tunisia or in Syria would say. If they are cronies, to the existing regime, or they develop some sort of political connection with the existing ruling elites. So you need to talk more about, different tools, how they get access to centers of power. But this is still like given the power structure and given the tools you use, you don't offer like generalizable outcome or large scale explanation of like business government relationship in Egypt, for example. Okay.
Okay, doctor, I have a question. In the critiques, the first point, برضو ما فهمتش what the certain thing that determine that I'm in the wrong way, that I'm getting the wrong outcome. برضو مش فاهمة ايه اللي هيحدد لي ده.
Yeah, this is I'm going to talk about this in the last lecture. Okay, this is part of your research methodology class. This is related to, like, if you remember the distinction between positivism, positivism, and interpretist or constructivist. Do you remember that?
Not
Go
really.
back to week 2. Yeah, this is week 2. Yeah, part of like believing in objective reality and observable like behavior or social and political phenomena. Part of it, methodologically speaking or scientifically, to make it scientific, you need to know
yeah, the behavior of the people is not a concrete basis that I can build a research on it, صح?
No, your results.
Okay. Time.
Yeah, your results are falsifiable.
Okay.
Okay.
Doctor, please.
Yeah.
How can we are going?
Yeah.
How are we going to write our reaction paper on the theory? Because it's not like the rational theory.
Rational choice. Yeah, it's not like the rational choice.
It doesn't have the assumptions, the application, and the critiques.
Yeah. So you here see like how soft and loose the cultural explanation is or interpretation is, right?
Yes.
For your reaction, yeah, for your reaction, this is part and parcel of the nature of the cultural explanation, by the way. So because you kept asking me about what's soft tools and what's hard tools, and this is like a very good point. Like rational choice, because they use like this kind of parsimonious analysis, they have like very clear-cut assumptions. They have like they received like very clear or like very clear critiques, and this is how they actually dealt with these critiques in a very obvious and clear way. With the paper, you focus on like the definition and by nature how like the three like point of views, how cultural would shape the like political behavior or people's behavior. So you have like different interpretation, as I mentioned in the beginning of the lecture. So you have like people like we shouldn't take it that seriously, and the other one, it's kind of, it offers like a strategic environment, like whether or not cultural theory would help you come up with this causal explanation. Okay, so first of all, like the definition. So why should we bother? What's culture? And how this would affect or shape people's perception and behavior. No consensus regarding that. Okay, and then you have like you can choose like one of the two applications still, like doing ethnography or survey data. Okay, and then you have like but I would say, like, if you ask about, I need to give you choice, but I would say like you can focus on James Scott here with the cultural approach, because we are going to study like survey data and psychological behavior later. But it's up to you. And then you have like the critique of the cultural theory, whether or not it can offer us rigorous analysis, and it can be proven wrong in a way or another, and what Geertz mentioned in this regard.
Okay, you have, excuse me, sorry, you have said the definition and the application and James Scott and the critique.
Before the definition, how it can offer us this kind of causal explanation, whether it can offer us causal explanation or powerful, independent and powerful explanation of people's perception and behavior. And then the application.
Okay.
And then like the critique. And there is a room, like now, you have like ample room to interject your personal opinion.
Okay. There's a point that I didn't get. How would it affect our thoughts, or how it would affect the results we come to?
The culture, right?
Yes.
Yeah, by definition, like you're embedded in a particular like social and social practices and particular, you know, power relations, and this would affect your orientation, like cognitive orientation or emotional attitudes towards, you know, something. Okay, towards particular object. It could be like political system, it could be like educational institutional or whatever. But here, as we do care about, you know, we're doing political science or comparative politics, so we do care about political science. So this is kind of but you mean like how culture like comes from?
Yes.
In the very beginning, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they mean like this kind of collective sense, like this kind of symbolic, you know, interaction between different peoples in a society. So you became like it would shape, you know, your beliefs and norms and this kind of attitudes towards something.
Okay. And the reaction paper has the same word limiter, right?
Yeah. And you can guys work in group as well, but this time I have an idea, because I need to know your faces, and it's very difficult through Zoom. So if you work in group, you can have like a Zoom video as well. If you are 5, for example, so you can have like a Zoom meeting together. You can just like say, my name is like Lujain Farida, and whatever, like I major in political science because blah, 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 like in a minute or something. And then you can attach the video with the reaction paper this time.
دكتور يعني احنا بعد ما نكتب الرياكشن بيبر نعمل زي زوم ميتنج نعمل explanation للي احنا كتبناه؟
No. It has nothing to do with the reaction paper. This is just for me, just to have like to know the faces, you know, while grading your assignments.
حضرتك عايز تتعرفي علينا بس
yeah, because we don't have time here. I had like, you know, very tentative thoughts to allocate like 10 minutes, you know, every lecture to give it to you in order to introduce yourself through like using the camera, but obviously it didn't work out. So this is the only way to do that. Okay. Because this is the first time for me like not to know the faces of my students.
Okay.
I'm good with names, but good at faces. So that's why I need to familiarize myself with your faces.
Okay, but doctor, sorry, we have to go because we have...
You have a different lecture. Yeah, I know. Yeah, this is for your reaction paper, okay? And meanwhile, if you have any question, I have office hour, so we can talk more about any queries or worries. And if you have any question, I can get back to you. But I just need to give you a heads up, like Thursday and Fridays, I'm kind of out of reach. So if you have like any question today, I can get back to you swiftly, or otherwise I can get back to you on Saturday, okay?
Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Yeah. See you next time. Bye-bye.